Okay, we were talking about hearing in the Senate. Well, there was a hearing over in the House today, a virtual hearing, in the House Energy and Commerce Committee on disinformation and extremism in the media. That was a thinly veiled attack on religious freedom by the left. I mean, on freedom of speech by the left. Here's a short clip of Congresswoman Kathy McMorris Rodgers, the ranking member on the committee, in her opening statement, basically pulling back the curtains on what was happening.
So today, the media is the target, but where does it end? We've already seen liberal ideology pushed in our schools, where we work, the books we read, who we communicate with, how we practice our faith. It's frightening. And you know what the worst part is? People are afraid of a woke and authoritarian system that is getting them fired, canceled, and shamed. And so they're being silent. They have no voice. They can't trust the broken institutions to protect them. This culture of fear is unjust. And this committee should not be using fear to force everyone to be the same or be destroyed. It's abuse of power, and it's a force of a state religion of liberal ideology. I embrace all of us to embrace our fundamental rights that lie at the foundation of a free government by free men.
Well, speaking of books, there may not be flames, but make no mistake about it, Amazon and other big tech companies, I think, would make some of history's most oppressive regimes proud with their virtual book burnings. Joining me now to give us the details, Ryan T. Anderson, the president of the Ethics and Public Policy Center. Ryan, welcome to Washington Watch.
Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So, Ryan, 3 years ago, you wrote a book, When Harry Became Sally. It was on the transgender movement, very, very detailed, documented, science-based. It was up there in Amazon. Then all of a sudden, overnight, the same week that the Equality Act is being voted on by Congress, the book vanishes. It goes up in virtual flames. What's going on?
That's exactly right. We still have no idea what's going on. This was brought to my attention Sunday afternoon. Someone was trying to buy the book on Amazon, and they said to me, "It's no longer there." And I was like, "What do you mean it's no longer there?" So I looked on my app, and it wasn't there anymore. I looked at my Amazon app, and we've reached out. My publisher has reached out, and all they have told us, they took 2 days to get back to us. So they told us late yesterday afternoon that it violates their content policy. And our only assumption is that, they've added a new hate speech aspect to their content policy, and they must be saying that the book somehow violates that, but they won't tell us what aspect of the policy it violated, and they won't tell us, what passage, what page, what sentence is the offending passage. So we have no idea.
Well, Ryan, that would suggest that every biology book would violate their standard.
I mean, it would strike that if this is the reason, then anyone who's telling the truth, anyone who believes that, we're created male and female, whether from a faith-based perspective or from a science-based perspective, all of those books are going to have to come off the cyber shelves.
So the Bible is next because Jesus said that in Matthew chapter 19.
I mean, it'll be really interesting for them to explain, what is the limiting principle here, right?
That's the problem.
Be banned next.
Well, that's the problem with the left. There's no consistency because they're not dealing with objective truth. It's just whatever they decided to be based upon the pressure that they receive from some special interest group.
Yeah, my sense is that with, President Trump being out of office now and Attorney General Barr no longer being the Attorney General, they feel like they can get away with a lot more. Our listeners probably remember towards the end of the Trump presidency, Attorney General Barr, they launched a suit against Google for monopolistic practices, antitrust practices. I think now big tech probably thinks that they can, get away with more because the Biden people are going to be cheering them on.
So, Ryan Anderson, let me ask you this question. Do you think this is an orchestrated effort by the left, not just your book, but just this censorship that we see sweeping America?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, so earlier today, both Abigail Schreyer's book and Deborah So's book were eliminated from Target's website. And for listeners who don't know, Abigail Schreyer has written a wonderful book about rapid onset gender dysphoria in girls. Deborah So has written a book about the science of our embodiment as male and female. And so for all three of these books to be disappeared within just days of each other, I mean, that's a big coincidence.
Now, Ryan, I understand that in America, today we really don't teach history in our schools, and so we don't have that framework, but some of us do know history. We've read history. We've studied history. There have been regimes in the past, going back to the 1930s, that burned books, anything that challenged their unnatural and irrational ideologies because they wanted nothing that could challenge it because they couldn't defend it. Are we seeing a repeat of that?
I think sadly so, because if they could defeat it, they would just argue on the merits. I mean, this is like where the lawyers say, where you can argue the facts, and you can argue the law, when you can't argue either, bang the table. And I mean, I think that's what we're seeing here. They can't argue based on the science. They can't argue based on the medicine. They can't argue based on the philosophy. They can't argue based on the theology. So what's left to do? Just not have the argument. Use our market power to shut it down.
A final question, Ryan, on the way out. What are we to do?
Well, I think, one, we should be contacting Amazon and voicing our displeasure at this as customers, letting them know they're losing customers. Two, we should buy the book elsewhere. It's sold out right now at Barnes & Noble, but you can get it directly from the publisher. And then three, I think we need to support institutions like FRC, like EPPC, that provide safe havens for scholars who are doing this work.
Absolutely.
If you want these books to be written, it's going to be the Family Research Council. It's going to be Ethics and Public Policy Center.
And I would think, Ryan, that given the market forces, that some smart entrepreneur is going to say, you know what, I'm going to take all the banned books and I'm going to sell them, and I'm going to make them.
That's a great idea. A great idea.
Ryan Anderson, thanks so much for joining us, and thank you for the contribution you make to a thinking community all across America.